The knock on the door was not a request. It was a summons, 3 solid thuds that vibrated through the cheap particle board and into the floor beneath my worn slippers. I froze, my hand hovering over the half-finished transcription on my screen, the doctor's dictated notes on a gallbladder removal suddenly irrelevant. No one ever knocked on my door after dark. Especially not like that. Lily was asleep in her room, the small nightlight casting a pale yellow glow on her unicorn drawings taped to the wall. My world was contained in those 3 small rooms, a fortress of routine and quiet desperation built to protect her. That knock was a cannonball against the gate. I padded to the door, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs. Through the peephole, the world distorted into a fisheye lens. I saw him. My neighbor. The man from the ridiculously large, dark-bricked house next door. The one with windows like vacant eyes and a lawn so perfect it looked like a threat. In the 6 months since I had moved into this small rental, we had never spoken. I saw him sometimes, getting out of a black car that purred with the sound of money I could not comprehend, always in a suit so perfectly tailored it seemed less like clothing and more like a second skin. He was a creature of shadows and silence in a neighborhood of loud children and overgrown yards. I opened the door a crack, the safety chain pulled taut. "Can I help you?" He did not try to peer inside. He did not smile. He simply stood there, filling my entire doorway, a mountain of dark wool and unreadable intentions. The porch light carved sharp angles into his face, a strong jaw, a straight nose, eyes so dark they drank the light and gave nothing back. He smelled of cold night air, cedar, and something else. Something metallic and sharp, like old pennies. "My name is Alessandro Rossi," he said. His voice was low, a gravelly murmur that seemed to come from deep in his chest. It was a voice that did not need to be raised to be heard. I just stared, waiting. My mind raced through possibilities. Was I playing my music too loud? Was my beat-up car an eyesore? Did he want to buy this tiny house and tear it down? He looked at me, his gaze direct and heavy. It did not feel like he was looking at a person. It felt like he was evaluating an asset. "I have a problem, miss." "Clara," I supplied, my voice barely a whisper. "Clara Evans." "Clara," he repeated, and the way he said it was different. He tasted the word, tested its weight. It sounded less like a name and more like a possession. "I have a problem. I require a solution. By Friday." I blinked, confusion warring with the primal instinct to slam the door in his face. "I don't understand. I need a wife," he said, the words as plain and devoid of emotion as if he were ordering a coffee. "By Friday. And you're going to be her." The world tilted. The chirping of crickets in the overgrown grass seemed to stop. I thought it was a joke, a cruel, bizarre joke. But his face held no humor. It was a mask of cold, hard certainty. This was not a proposal. It was a declaration of fact. This was the world I was now in, and I had a terrifying, sinking feeling that I was not going to be allowed to leave. I finally found my voice, a strangled, incredulous sound. "You're insane." I started to close the door, but his hand shot out, not touching the door but simply rising, a gesture of such absolute authority that I stopped. My hand trembled on the knob. "Insanity is a luxury I cannot afford," Alessandro said, his voice dropping even lower. "There are certain business obligations. Expectations. A man in my position needs a family. A wife. It provides an image of stability. Of permanence. So go find one." I snapped, a spark of anger cutting through the fear. "Put an ad on Craigslist. I'm not for sale." His eyes flickered for the first time, a brief, dangerous glint. "Everyone is for sale, Clara. It is just a matter of finding the correct currency. Your landlord sold me your lease this afternoon. As of an hour ago, I am the owner of this house." He let that sink in. The foundation of my tiny, safe world turned to sand beneath my feet. "You and your daughter can be out by morning. Or you can be my wife." My blood ran cold. My daughter. Lily. He had said her name. He knew about Lily. I glanced back toward her bedroom door, a wave of protective fury washing over me. "You stay away from my daughter. She is the reason I am here, he said, and the coldness in his tone was terrifying. A single mother. Desperate. Ruthless. Plausible. You have no family nearby to ask questions. No close friends who would find it strange. You are a ghost. The perfect candidate. He was not wrong. I had moved here to escape a past that had left me with nothing but Lily and a mountain of debt. I worked from home as a freelance medical transcriptionist, my life a quiet loop of childcare, work, and sleep. I was invisible, and he had seen me. What if I say no? I asked, the words feeling foolish as soon as they left my mouth. I told you. You will be out by morning. I will own the house, but your debt, that will follow you. The hospital bills from your daughter's asthma attack last year. The loan on your car. The credit cards you use for groceries. I have purchased it all. Your debt now belongs to me. He delivered the information with the dispassionate air of an accountant reading a ledger. He had dissected my life, found every weakness, and laid it bare on my doorstep. You will have nothing. No home. No money. And a debt so large you will never escape it. How will you care for your child then? The question was not a question. It was a cage. He had built it around me, bar by bar, and now he was locking the door. The choice he was offering was not a choice at all. It was survival on his terms or ruin on his. I thought of Lily, of her small, trusting face, of the promise I had made to myself to always keep her safe. Safety. What did that even mean now? Was it safer in the clutches of this monster, or cast out into the world with nothing? This is a business arrangement, he continued, seeing the surrender in my eyes. You will live in my house. You will wear my ring. You will be seen at my side when required. In return, your daughter will want for nothing. The best schools, the best doctors, a future you cannot possibly provide for her on your own. Your debts will be gone. You will be protected. Protected from what? I whispered. A flicker of something that might have been grim amusement crossed his face. From everything else. I looked past him, at his house. It was not a home. It was a fortress. And he was inviting me inside. Not as a guest, but as a prisoner with a gilded cage. I looked back at the closed door to Lily's room. I had been fighting so hard for so long, trying to keep our heads above water. I was so tired. The fight was over. I had lost. Taking a shaky breath, I unlatched the chain. The metallic click sounded like a death sentence. I pulled the door open. What do I have to do? Alessandra's expression did not change, but I felt the shift in the air. The predator had its prey. He gave a slight nod, a gesture of finality. Pack a bag for you and the child. One of my men will be here in the morning to collect the rest. You will be moving in tonight. He did not wait for an answer. He simply turned and walked back across the lawn, his shadow swallowed by the darkness of his own home, leaving me alone on my porch with the ruins of my life. The first 24 hours in his house were a lesson in silence. The place was vast and cold, all marble floors, dark wood, and towering ceilings. It absorbed sound. Lily's small footsteps echoed in the cavernous foyer, a cheerful, innocent sound in a place that felt devoid of life. She, in her 7-year-old wisdom, thought it was a palace. She ran her hands over the smooth, cold surfaces, her eyes wide with wonder. I saw only the bars of the cage. Alessandro was a ghost in his own home. He was there, then he was gone. Men in dark suits came and went, speaking in low murmurs, their faces impassive. They never looked at me, but I felt their eyes, cataloging me, assessing me. I was a new piece on the board, and they were all waiting to see how the game would be played. He had given me a suite of rooms. A bedroom for me, an adjoining one for Lily. They were beautiful, furnished with antiques that probably cost more than my car, but they felt sterile, unlived in. There was no dust, no clutter, no sign of a human life. It was a museum of wealth, not a home. That night, he called me to his study. The room was lined with books from floor to ceiling, but they looked untouched. He sat behind a massive mahogany desk, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He gestured to the chair opposite him. I sat, my back ramrod straight, my hands clenched in the lap of my gray wool sweater. "There are rules," he began, his voice calm measured. "Rule 1. In this house, you do not ask questions about my business. You will see things. You will overhear things. You will ignore them." He took a slow sip of his drink. "Rule 2. When we are in public, you are my adoring wife. You will smile. You will touch my arm. You will play the part. Your daughter's well-being depends on your performance. And Rule 3. I asked, my voice tight. His eyes met mine over the rim of the glass. "You will not try to leave. There is nowhere for you to go that I cannot find you." The threat was clear, unspoken but absolute. I was his. My life, and more importantly, Lily's life, was now entirely in his hands. The weight of that was suffocating. But as I sat there, under the intensity of his gaze, a flicker of defiance sparked within me. He thought I was a ghost, a pliant, desperate woman he could mold into whatever shape he needed.
He thought he had bought me.
But he had only bought my compliance. My mind, my will, that was still my own. He thought he knew who I was. He was about to find out how wrong he was. The next day, the education began. Alessandro did not teach me how to be a wife. He taught me how to be a target. He had a man named Nico, broad-shouldered and quiet, bring in a series of photographs, laying them out on the polished dining room table like a grim deck of cards. "The Falcone family," Alessandro said, his voice a low hum beside me. He tapped a picture of a silver-haired man with a cruel mouth. "Giovanni Falcone, the head. He sees my expansion into the port as a personal insult. He is old world. He believes in blood and retribution." He moved to the next photo. His sons. Marco, the brute. Luca, the snake. I stared at the faces of men who were now my enemies, men I had never met, who existed in a world I had only seen in movies. It was surreal. My biggest worry yesterday had been making rent. Now it was memorizing the faces of a rival crime family. "What do you want from me?" I asked, looking up at him. He was closer than I expected. I could smell the faint, clean scent of his cologne again, the cedar and sandalwood, a scent that was beginning to feel like the official fragrance of my captivity. "I want you to be aware," he said, his dark eyes intense. "They will look for a weakness. A new wife, a young child, you are a weakness. I need you to become a fortress. You will not go anywhere without Nico. You will not speak to strangers. You will vary your routine when you take Lily to her new school." He was not asking for my opinion. He was giving orders. It was infuriating. But beneath the anger, a cold knot of fear tightened in my stomach. He was right. Lily and I were liabilities. We were the soft spots in his armor. That afternoon, Nico drove me to pick Lily up from the prestigious private school she was now enrolled in. It was a world of crisp uniforms, manicured lawns, and mothers in expensive athletic wear. I felt like an imposter in my simple jeans and sweater. As Lily ran to me, her face alight with stories of her new friends, I saw it. A dark sedan parked across the street. It was just a car. It could have been anyone. But the windows were tinted too dark, and the man in the driver's seat was watching us. Not casually. He was watching with purpose. My hand tightened on Lily's. "Come on, sweetie. Let's go." Nico had seen it too. His eyes met mine in the rear-view mirror, a silent acknowledgement. He said nothing, but he took a different route back to the house, a labyrinth of side streets and unexpected turns. The sedan did not follow. When we got back, Alessandro was waiting in the foyer. He did not ask what happened. He looked at Nico, who gave a barely perceptible nod. Then Alessandro's eyes found mine. "You did well," he said. It was not praise. It was an assessment, a statement of fact. That night, I could not sleep. The near miss, the cold reality of the danger, it was a poison in my veins. I crept out of my room and down the sweeping staircase, drawn to the kitchen for a glass of water. A light was on in the study. I paused, hearing voices. One was Alessandro's, low and hard. The other was older, pleading. "She was a civilian, Alessandro. You cannot drag her into this. The commission will not approve of a marriage outside the families. The commission wants stability. Alessandro's voice cut through the other man's. Falcone is using my bachelorhood against me, painting me as a lone wolf, unpredictable. A wife, a family, it changes the narrative. It gives me legitimacy. And the girl? The child? There was a long silence. I held my breath, pressing my ear closer to the heavy oak door. They are my responsibility now, Alessandro said, and the finality in his tone was chilling. Falcone will make a move. Let him. He will find that my house is not so easy to breach. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding. So that was it. I was a prop. A piece of theater designed to appease some shadowy council and outmaneuver an enemy. He was not protecting me because he cared. He was protecting me because I was an asset.
A tool.
The realization should have felt cold, but instead, it felt clarifying. I understood the game now. And if I was going to be a piece on the board, I would not be a pawn. I made my way back upstairs. As I passed a small table in the hallway, I saw a framed photograph I had not noticed before. It was old, slightly faded. A young Alessandro, maybe a teenager, stood with his arm around a smiling girl with the same dark eyes. There was a genuine warmth in his expression, a light that was now completely gone. He looked happy. He looked human. I wondered who she was, and what had happened to extinguish that light in his eyes. It was the first crack I had seen in his marble facade. The first hint of a wound. My choice was made that day, watching the black sedan. I could have screamed. I could have run to the school principal, called the police, made a scene. It might have been my only chance to get out, to expose him and escape. But I had looked at Lily's trusting face, and I had gotten into the car with Nico. I had chosen the gilded cage. Therefore, I had to learn its rules, its dangers, and its secrets. My survival and Lily's depended on it. The wedding was a quiet affair at the courthouse, a legal formality that felt utterly meaningless. I wore a simple cream-colored dress Alessandro had provided. He wore a dark gray suit that made him look like a storm cloud given human form. We said the words. We signed the papers. A heavy gold band was placed on my finger. It felt less like a ring and more like a shackle. Life fell into a strange rhythm. Mornings with Lily, afternoons under Nico's watchful eye, evenings in the silent, cavernous house. Alessandro was a constant, brooding presence. He was rarely home for dinner, but when he was, we ate in a formal dining room so large our voices seemed to get lost on the way across the table. He would ask Lily about her day, his voice softer than I ever heard it otherwise. He listened with a focused intensity, as if her stories about art class and recess were vital intelligence. He was good with her. Gentle. It was a confusing contradiction to the man I knew he was. One evening, I found him in the study, staring at that old photograph of him and the young woman. Who was she? I asked, my voice soft. He did not look up. My sister. Isabella. She's beautiful. She's dead, he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. But his knuckles were white where he gripped his glass. Falcone's father ordered the hit. A message. I was supposed to be in the car with her. I was late. The wound. There it was. Not just a scar, but a raw, gaping wound he carried every day.
Guilt.
It radiated from him, a cold, dark energy. He blamed himself. Everything he did, the fortress he had built, the power he had amassed, it was all to prevent something like that from ever happening again. And I and my daughter were now under the purview of that obsessive, guilt-ridden protection.
I'm sorry, you whispered.
He finally looked at me, his eyes dark pools of memory and pain. Sorrow is useless. Vengeance is not. He placed the photograph face down on his desk. The conversation was over, but the ground between us had shifted. He had shown me his ghosts, and in doing so, he had made himself fractionally more human. The escalation came 2 weeks later. It was not a dark sedan this time. It was a package delivered to the house. A simple brown box addressed to me. Nico intercepted it, his face grim. Alessandro was called. He opened it in his study, with me standing in the doorway. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a single, perfect porcelain doll. It had blonde hair, just like Lily's, and a small, neat crack running down its face. I felt the blood drain from my own face. My knees went weak. This was not a threat against him. This was a threat against her. Against my child. Something inside me snapped. The fear, the compliance, the quiet acceptance, it all burned away, replaced by a white-hot, primal rage. Alessandro's reaction was terrifyingly quiet. He did not yell. He did not curse. A stillness fell over him, the absolute calm at the center of a hurricane. He closed the box, his movements precise, deliberate. "Nico," he said, his voice lethally soft. "Find out who the courier was. I want a name." Nico nodded and left. Alessandro turned to me. I expected to see anger. Instead, I saw a flicker of that same guilt I had seen when he spoke of his sister. He had brought this danger to my daughter's door. He had made her a target.
"She will be safe," he said. "It was a vow." "How?"
I demanded, my voice shaking with fury. "You can't be with her every second. They know about her. They know what she looks like." "I will handle it." "That's not good enough." I stepped into the room, my fear making me brave. "You brought this into our lives. You have to end it." He looked at me, a long, unreadable expression on his face. "I will." That night, he left the house with Nico and 2 other men. He did not return until dawn. He came into my room, where I sat awake in a chair, watching the door to Lily's room. He had a dark bruise on his cheekbone, and his knuckles were split and bloody. A dark stain bloomed on the sleeve of his white shirt. He stopped in front of me. "The courier talked," he said. "It was Marco Falcone. He thought it would be a clever message." "And," I whispered, my eyes fixed on the blood on his hands. "He will not be sending any more messages." The finality in his voice was absolute. He had crossed a line. And he had done it for Lily. For me. I stood up and went to the en-suite bathroom, retrieving the first aid kit. Without a word, I took his hand and began to clean the cuts on his knuckles. His skin was warm. His hand was large and steady in mine, a hand capable of both breathtaking violence and, I was beginning to realize, a strange and terrifying form of protection. He did not pull away. He just watched me, his dark eyes following the movement of my hands. The silence in the room was not empty. It was filled with everything we were not saying. He had killed for my daughter. I was cleaning the blood from his hands. The line between us, the one that had defined me as his prisoner and him as my keeper, had irrevocably blurred. I was no longer just a prop. I was a part of this. And in that moment, cleaning the evidence of his violence, I crossed a line I could never uncross. This was my life now. A world of shadows and blood, governed by a man who spoke the language of violence as fluently as I spoke English. I looked up and met his gaze. He said my name. Just my name. Clara, the way he said it, it was not a question or a statement. It was a confession. A claim. And I did not look away. The action against Marco Falcone had consequences. It was a declaration of war. The quiet tension that had simmered beneath the surface of our lives erupted into open conflict. Giovanni Falcone could not let the death of his son go unanswered. But Alessandro had been prepared. The house became a true fortress. Guards patrolled the perimeter. Every car that entered the long driveway was checked. Lily was pulled from school, a private tutor hired to teach her within the cold, marble walls of our prison. She missed her friends, but I told her it was a temporary measure, a lie that tasted like ash in my mouth. My own role shifted. I was no longer just the wife in name. Alessandro started talking to me, not about the specifics of his business, but about the strategy. He would pace his study at night, a map of the city spread on his desk, and he would talk aloud, tracing the lines of territories, supply routes, and rival strongholds. He was testing theories, weighing options. And he was doing it in front of me. He was showing me the machinery of his empire. I listened, and I learned. My work as a medical transcriptionist had trained me to listen for details, to find the patterns in complex information. I started to see the connections he was laying out. I saw the weaknesses in the Falcone organization, the overextended supply lines, the key players who seemed to be sources of internal friction. One night, he was staring at the file of an associate he suspected of being a leak. Falcone knew about the shipment at Pier 12. Only 4 people knew the route. Me, Nico, you, and Santino. Santino. A capo who had always been overly friendly to me, his smiles never reaching his eyes. "What do you know about him?" I asked. "He's been with my family for 20 years. My father trusted him. People change," I said quietly. I remembered transcribing a doctor's notes once about a long-time patient who suddenly developed a gambling addiction after a personal tragedy. It had destroyed his life from the inside out. "What's going on in his personal life?" Alessandro looked at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He made a call. The next day, we had the answer. Santino's wife had an aggressive form of cancer. The treatments were experimental, expensive. He was desperate for money. Giovanni Falcone had offered him a fortune to betray Alessandro. It was my observation, my seemingly innocuous question, that had uncovered the betrayal. Alessandro dealt with Santino quietly, efficiently. There was no public execution. The man simply disappeared. But the look Alessandro gave me afterward was different. It was a look of respect. I was no longer just a liability to be protected. I was an asset. But being an asset had its own dangers. The Falcones now knew I was not just a figurehead. The information about Santino could only have come from inside Alessandro's inner circle. They started to see me as a player and advisor. And that made me a more valuable target. The moment I almost lost him came without warning. We were at a formal charity dinner, a necessary public appearance. It was one of the few times we left the compound. The security was heavy, but the Falcones were smarter than we anticipated. They did not attack him directly. They created a diversion, a fire alarm that sent the ballroom into chaos. In the confusion, as Nico and the other guards were trying to get us to the exit, a man bumped into Alessandro. It was nothing, a simple jostle in the crowd. But I saw the glint of metal. I saw the man's hand slip a thin, pointed blade between Alessandro's ribs. It was so fast, so quiet. Alessandro grunted, a sharp intake of breath. The man was gone, swallowed by the panicked crowd. Alessandro staggered, his hand going to his side. When he pulled it away, it was covered in blood. "Get him to the car," Nico yelled, his face a mask of fury. The world slowed down. The noise of the crowd faded to a dull roar. All I could see was the red stains spreading across Alessandro's crisp white shirt. All I could feel was a terrifying, hollow certainty. I could not lose him. The thought was illogical. My freedom, my normal life, depended on him being gone. But in that moment, the only thing that mattered was keeping him alive. We got him back to the house. We could not go to a hospital. A gunshot or a knife wound would bring the police, questions we could not answer. Alessandro had a doctor on call, a nervous man with shaking hands who worked for the family. He stitched the wound in the sterile, white-tiled basement that served as an infirmary. The blade had missed his lung, but he had lost a lot of blood. For 2 days, he drifted in and out of consciousness. I did not leave his side. I changed his bandages. I wiped the sweat from his brow. I sat in the quiet of his massive, lonely bedroom and watched the rise and fall of his chest. Lily would come to the door and peer in, her small face etched with worry. "Is he okay?" she would whisper. "He's resting," I would tell her. "He's going to be fine." I was not sure if I was lying to her or to myself. On the 3rd day, he woke up. His eyes, hazy with pain, found mine. "Clara," he rasped. "I'm here," I said, my hand instinctively finding his. His fingers, surprisingly strong, closed around mine. "They came for me," he said, his voice rough. "They failed." He held my gaze. The mask was gone. The cold, calculating dawn was stripped away, leaving only the man, wounded and vulnerable. "You stayed." Of course I stayed. It was not a declaration of love. It was a statement of fact, a truth that had taken root in the blood and fear. I was his. Not by contract, not by coercion, but by choice. The choice I made every day I woke up in this house, every time I cleaned his wounds, every time I saw the way he looked at my daughter. But my choice, this new, terrifying loyalty, had a cost I did not yet understand. Giovanni Falcone had tried to kill the king. He had failed, and now he would turn his attention to the queen. The attack changed Alessandro. The wound on his side healed, but something inside him hardened. The war with the Falcones was no longer business. It was personal. He became more ruthless, more calculating. The city held its breath as the two families tore at each other's empires. And I was at the center of it. My quiet life was a distant memory. I now sat in on meetings with his capos. I listened to reports. My insights, born from a life outside their violent world, were often surprisingly useful. I saw angles they missed. I understood motivations that were not driven by power or greed. Alessandro began to rely on my counsel. We were a team, a king and his unexpected queen, ruling over a kingdom of shadows. Giovanni Falcone, realizing he could not get to Alessandro through force, changed his tactics. He decided to dismantle Alessandro's legitimacy. He sent word to the commission, the ruling body of the families, that Alessandro had broken tradition by marrying an outsider. He painted me as a gold digger, a common woman who had no respect for their ways, whose presence weakened the Rossi family. He demanded a sit-down, a meeting where Alessandro would have to answer for his choice. "He is trying to strip me of my seat," Alessandro said one night, the tension in him a palpable force in the room. "If the commission sides with him, my family will be declared rogue. Everyone will be free to move against us. It will be a slaughter." "So we fight," I said, my voice steady. "We cannot fight the commission," he countered. "This is a battle of politics, not bullets. He will use you as the weapon against me." "Then let him," I said, a desperate, audacious plan forming in my mind. I had spent weeks poring over the Rossi family ledgers, the old files Alessandro kept in a safe. I was looking for a weakness, any piece of leverage. And I had found one. It was a ghost, a half-forgotten transaction from 30 years ago. A debt owed to the Rossi family by Giovanni Falcone's father, a debt of honor that was never repaid. In their world, honor was everything. "I have to be at that meeting," I told Alessandro. He refused. "Absolutely. It's too dangerous. You are the one thing they cannot touch. If you are there, you are a target." "I'm already a target," I argued. "He put a crack in a doll's face, Alessandro. He sent a man to put a knife in your ribs. There is no safe place for me anymore. The only way we survive this is to win. Let me come with you." He looked at me, his face a conflict of fury and fear. He was afraid for me. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The cold, untouchable man was afraid of losing me. The final confrontation took place in the back room of an old Italian restaurant in Little Italy. The air was thick with the smell of garlic, old wine, and stale cigar smoke. The heads of the 5 families sat at a long table, their faces like stone masks. Giovanni Falcone sat opposite Alessandro, a smug, predatory smile on his face. I sat beside Alessandro, my hands folded calmly in my lap, my heart hammering against my ribs. Falcone made his case, his voice dripping with false respect. He spoke of tradition, of bloodlines, of the sanctity of their world. He painted me as an intruder, an American whore who had bewitched Alessandro and threatened their stability. When he was finished, a heavy silence filled the room. The old man at the head of the table, Don Moretti, the head of the commission, turned his cold eyes to me. "The woman will speak." I stood up. I felt Alessandro's hand rest on my arm, a silent offer of strength. I met Giovanni Falcone's gaze. "You speak of honor, Don Falcone," I began, my voice clear and steady. "Let us talk of honor. Let us talk of a debt owed by your father to Alessandro's father. A debt for saving your family from the Irish 30 years ago. A debt of blood that was to be repaid with loyalty. A debt that your family ledger conveniently fails to mention, but the Rossi ledger does not." A murmur went through the room. Giovanni's face went pale. I pressed on, laying out the details, the dates, the names. I had memorized it all. You speak of my unsuitability, but you sit here on a throne built on a lie. Your family's position on this commission is predicated on an honor you never earned and a debt you never paid. Before you question my husband's choice of wife, perhaps you should first settle your father's accounts. I sat down. The silence was absolute. I had not just defended myself. I had attacked his legacy, his very foundation. In their world, it was a mortal blow. Don Moretti looked at Giovanni Falcone, his expression one of pure contempt. Is this true? Falcone stammered, his arrogance shattered. It was a misunderstanding. There are no misunderstandings in matters of honor, Moretti said, his voice like gravel. He turned to Alessandro. Your wife is persuasive. The Falcone matter will be handled internally. Your seat is secure. It was over. We had won. As we left the restaurant, Alessandro's hand found mine, his grip tight. He did not say anything until we were in the armored car, the city lights flashing past the tinted windows. You saved my family, Clara, he said, his voice raw with an emotion I could not name. We saved our family, I corrected him softly. But victory in this world always comes at a price. As we pulled up to the house, we saw the flashing lights. Yellow police tape cordoned off the driveway. Nico met us at the gate, his face grim. It's the tutor, he said. Falcone must have sent someone before the meeting. A message in case he lost. My blood ran cold. Lily. She's safe. She's with the maids. She didn't see anything. The cost. There it always was. An innocent woman dead. A life sacrificed on the altar of our survival. The reality of what we were, what this life entailed, crashed down on me. I had become a queen in a brutal kingdom, and the blood of others was the price of my crown. Later that night, after the police had left and an unnatural quiet had fallen over the house, I went to check on Lily. She was asleep, her face peaceful in the soft glow of her nightlight, clutching a stuffed unicorn. She was safe. I had done this for her. I had made a deal with a monster to keep her safe, and in the process, I had become something monstrous myself. Alessandro was standing in the doorway, watching us. The shadows carved lines of exhaustion on his face. All the fight was gone, leaving only a deep, weary stillness. He had built this fortress to keep the ghosts of his past at bay, but the walls were stained with fresh blood. He walked over to me, stopping so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body. He gently touched my cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear I did not even realize had fallen. His touch was not a claim of ownership. It was something quieter, deeper. It was an acknowledgement of a shared burden. This life, he said, his voice barely a whisper. It costs. I know, I said, not looking away from his dark, haunted eyes. He did not say he loved me. He did not promise a happy ending. He did not pretend the world outside these walls was not still waiting to tear us apart. He simply stood there with me, in the quiet of my daughter's room, a silent partner in the dangerous life I had chosen. I had come to his door a desperate mother in a worn-out sweater. I was now the wife of a Mafia boss, my hands stained with the ink of his ledgers and the blood of his enemies. I had made my choice. And as he leaned down and gently pressed his lips to mine for the first time, a kiss that tasted of cedar, violence, and a shared, terrible grief, I knew I would choose him again. I would choose this. For her.
For us. This was my family now.
And I would protect it. No matter the cost.